Hey guys, it is April from Getting Huggy with It. Today I am here to do my June wrap up. I had a really great reading month. I read 8 books. Some of these were like 5 stars, some of them were duds, of course, as that just always seems to happen. And one of them I actually DNF'd. So let's get into it. So first I just want to get the DNF out of the way, and I need to apologize because I could not finish reading Into the Water by Paula Hawkins. Now, this was part of my Sweet Summer Read series, and I was so excited to read Into the Water. It has such an interesting premise, which is essentially there is a body of water in this town where women seem to go into and they die. They either kill themselves or they're being killed, and we are following the latest woman who's gone into the pool. Sadly, this just was not good for me. There were so many characters to follow. I certainly don't want a Charles Dickens cast of characters when I'm reading a thriller. I want something light and fluffy. I don't want to have to take notes, and I don't want this many characters when I'm reading a thriller. I also got really bored while I was reading this. I thought the writing was bad. Now with Paula Hawkins, A Girl on a Train, I wasn't blown away by that. I think I gave that 3 stars. So now I know I'm not going to read Paula Hawkins anymore. I'm done. I gave this, well, I didn't give it anything because I stopped reading it. And I'm glad that I did, because I hate pushing through with a book when I'm hating it, and every time I pick it up I'm rolling my eyes. So it was a dud. Luckily, the next book that I read was 5 stars, was a thriller. I'm so thrilled that I read it. I read Since We Fell by Dennis Lehane. Now this is a wild ride. I've done a whole separate review for that, and I'll link that down below or up above. But this is such a cool, fast-paced story. It's kind of divided in 2. The first portion is really important for character development. It's fast-paced, but you don't really get into the thriller until the second half. And when you get into the thriller of the second half, you're just in. And this follows a woman named Rachel Child, and she is a journalist who had a little meltdown on camera, and her career is kind of over. She's now a shut-in, and the story opens with her killing her husband, and you don't know why, and the book explains it, and it's so much fun. Next, I read The Distant Hours by Kate Morton. I loved this book. I gave it 4 stars. This is most definitely one of Kate Morton's darker books. All of her books seem to kind of uncover a mystery in the past, and it flips back and forth from past to present, and it always takes place in some sort of older building. In this case, it's a castle. In The Distant Hours, it starts out when a letter arrives for this woman's mother, and it arrives 50 years later than it was supposed to, and she brings the letter to her mom, and her mom opens the letter and starts to read it, and kind of shuts down. She doesn't cry, but she runs away to her room and shuts the door. And her mom's a very stoic person, and she's never seen her mom kind of unravel very easily, and here she is very emotional by this letter, and she wants to know what's happened in this letter. And then it goes back in time to her mom when she was a child, and she visited this castle and made friends with the Blythe sisters, and you uncover what that letter was all about. I love those kinds of stories. I love Kate Morton so much. Now, I did find the end a little bit rushed on her part, and I wished that she'd just taken a little bit more time with it, but I loved it. I just really enjoy Kate Morton. She can do no wrong to me. I also read Ella Enchanted. I did a buddy read with Kate Howe for Ella Enchanted, and I loved this book. This is a middle grade book that I gave 4 stars. It's just the sweetest story. It's a Cinderella retelling about Ella. A fairy comes to her at her birth, essentially, and gives her the gift of being a very obedient child and person for all of her days. And that means that she has to do everything that anyone demands of her. So if you say, go and pick up the laundry, she'll go and pick up the laundry, but she doesn't have a choice. So she might inside be like trying to fight it, but she just can't. And it is her story, and I loved Ella. I thought she was a really great role model for kids. She was feisty and funny, and I just really loved her little storyline, and I think I would definitely pick this up from my niece Althea when she's old enough. She's 6 now, so I'm not sure if she might have to wait a couple of years before she can dive into this, but very, very sweet, and I was happy to read it with Kate. Another buddy read that I did with Stephanie over at That's What She Read. We read The Tiger's Wife together, and this was a struggle for both of us. I finished it. I gave it 2 stars. I don't think that Stephanie finished it, and I don't blame her at all because it was a rough read. It was magical realism, and it was dense. It's about a girl whose grandfather dies unexpectedly far away from home. They're trying to discover what happened to him. Some of them know what happened and some of them don't, and she then journeys to the area that he died to get his belongings and stuff. And there were certain scenes in here that nearly made me give this 3 stars because they stick with me. There's an image of her grandfather and her on a very foggy night, and he wakes her up in the middle of the night and says, come with me, and they go out into this fog, and all of a sudden she sees that there's this man walking an elephant. And those kinds of scenes just really stuck with me. They were vivid and beautiful, wonderfully written. But I found there were way too many tangents, and magical realism is definitely hit and miss for me. So I had to give this 2 stars because by the end of it, I was just like, are we done yet? I'm ready to be done. So that's not a good sign. Next, I read Parable of the Sower by Octavia Butler. This was a buddy read with Krista over at Books and Jams. Now, I think Krista took away something a little more positive from this book than I did because I gave it 2 stars. I was extremely excited to read this book. This is a dystopian book about a world in which water is very scarce, fires are rampant, and it follows a young girl who lives in a gated community, and they're trying to survive. And she wants to be really realistic that something bad might happen and she might have to survive on her own outside of the walls. And it follows her in that gated community, and it follows her outside of the gated community as well. It's a very violent world, and then there are characters in it that have such extreme empathy that they actually feel the pain of other people around them. And she is one of those people. So if she, cut someone, she would feel like she was cut. So that was a really interesting kind of addition to it. And I most definitely enjoyed the beginning of it. But as it went along, I found that there were decisions that the character was making that was very loosey-goosey. I didn't like the writing. I found a lot of the book was just kind of for shock factor. So, I mean, this is very, very violent. There are images in here that I can never get out of my head. If you like children at all, this would be a hard read. I just didn't really believe in the character, and it fell flat for me. So I gave it 2 stars, and I don't know if I'll read another Octavia Butler. Maybe, but probably in like 5 years or something. Next up, I read Blkack Mad Wheel by Josh Malerman. This is his follow-up to Bird Box, which you know I adored. And I really liked Blkack Mad Wheel. I gave it 4 stars. And this follows this band, and they're approached by the army, and they are sent to the desert to discover this sound. And this sound makes all weapons just kind of fall apart and not work. So the army obviously wants to know what this is. They think it's a weapon that obviously could be used against them if, you know, they can't use their guns, they can't use missiles. So the band goes out to the desert to discover the sound. And the sound, it's so interesting. What he does with the senses in all of his books is really interesting. I felt like I could hear the sound even though I was reading a book. So the sound has made them all react differently. Like when the army guy comes to the band and says, we need you to discover the source of the sound, like what the sound even is, because it's almost impossible to listen to. And he has a recording of the sound and he's about to play it. And I can't remember if he leaves the room or puts in earphones, but he's like, I can't listen to it again. And so they're like, oh, okay, whatever. And then he presses play. And they all, each in their own individual way, kind of start to react to the sound. Some people like are writhing on the floor. Others are throwing up. It just makes you sick. It was really interesting. It was really weird. It was stranger than Bird Box, that's for sure. But I love Josh Malerman. He's awesome. Next up, I read Final Girls by Riley Sager. I gave this 5 stars because, guys, this is a super refreshing thriller. I also did a video about this, which I'll link up here or below or somewhere. So good. This follows Quincy Carpenter, who is a final girl because she is the lone survivor of like a mass murder. And there are a couple of other final girls that she's become friends with, and one of them dies. You're unraveling the story of what has just happened, this final girl that's died, and you're unraveling what happened to Quincy in her past because she doesn't remember that period of time in the woods when all of her friends were murdered. It's so refreshing. If you like horror movies, if you like Scream or like Halloween, you would like this. So go and check out my video about it because, oh, I loved it so much. And then last but not least is I finally read The Vegetarian, which I gave 4 stars. Wow. This was, okay, very short, like under 200 pages. Packs an enormous punch. This is about a woman who decides to become a vegetarian. The vegetarian is told from the viewpoint of 3 people. The husband, her brother-in-law, and then her sister. And they all react in their own ways to this woman becoming a vegetarian. I don't even know exactly how to explain it. It's so odd. But it's odd and superbly written. Like, I can't say enough about the writing. But it's also incredibly violent. There's a lot of sexual violence in here, so just be warned. But I will definitely be reading more by this author. So those are all of the books that I read in June. I would love to hear what your favorite book that you read in June was. I hope you had a good reading month, and I will see you soon. Bye!